Hey everybody, it's Chainsaw. Today I'm reviewing the brand new album from thrash metal band Death Angel entitled The Dream Calls for Blood. Let's get into this album. So, I've always heard of the band name Death Angel around for a very long time. I've always heard the name involved with thrash metal, current thrash metal bands that are looked upon as inspiration and stuff like that. And I finally just decided to look up this band about a couple years ago, and I've always enjoyed some of their past work, and when I heard of this new album coming out, I was just excited to see what the next thing that this band is going to release to us. And I will have to say, The Dream Calls for Blood surprised me a little bit in a very positive way. I've always known, thinking of the band, thinking as heavy, aggressive thrash metal band that always comes up with some unique ideas each album, and always just has some very memorable tracks throughout each record. And so, listening to this album the first run through, the first couple things that hit me in my head after hearing it the first time was that this is a very aggressive album. But it's not too aggressive where that's all it is. That's all you get. There's more in-depth things you got to really look into to really see the other things besides the really aggressive side of Death Angel throughout this album. We also get some groove-type riffs throughout this album. We also get some very interesting acoustic/clean guitar riffs, opening tracks, and stuff like that. We get some very intense lead guitar soloing, which we've always known of that from Death Angel, but it's definitely a high point throughout this album, the lead guitar work. The drumming is very intense and insane, and I just enjoy the drumming throughout this record. It's very interesting to listen to. The bass work, this is where it gets interesting, because the first run through of this album, I paid attention to basically every single thing that's throughout this album, but I didn't notice until the second listen through that there was one particular part in a song that really stood out to me. The riffs are going, the song is just, going along, and then I start hearing the bass comes out of nowhere and starts playing something on high on the frets, and I'm just like, huh, I didn't hear that the first run through. And then when I start to really listen even more, in depth, really listening, the bass is standing out more and more. And that's what really caught me by surprise, because the first run through, I just didn't hear it. But then I started hearing all these bass parts that I was missing. And so, listening more in depth, you get to hear these bass guitar parts that are really sticking out throughout this album. And it's just showing that, it's not all about the guitars, the bass is coming through as well. And then I started hearing the bass more clearly, so that was really awesome. I will talk about some of the tracks that I think stood out to me on this record. I'm not saying these are the best tracks and you better, agree. In my personal opinion, these are the tracks that really stood out to me musically and just song structure-wise and all of that good stuff that we've come to know of fans of metal and thrash metal. So, Left for Dead, the opening track, that had a very interesting, clean guitar opening. It was kind of eerie, and it was just like, oh, I like this. This is very good as an opener. It's kind of like just, you're waiting for the kick-in. You're waiting for the aggressive, heavy, distorted guitar thrash riff to come in, and when it hits, it is very intense, very loud, and very heavy, and it just sends you off in this very, very good track from Death Angel. It really is a great opener in my personal opinion. Very standout track for sure. Now, The Dream Calls for Blood, the actual title track, I enjoyed that track. It was not exactly so aggressive like the opener Left for Dead, but it sure was a very groovy / aggressive track, and it was just a very good track to listen to. I really enjoyed some of the guitar riffs, some of the changes, the vocal performances, and of course also just the entire band having some really having fun with the track. Really, that's what it felt like to me. Execution / Don't Save Me. Now, Execution, I'm gonna have to say, since it's the first thing, is basically an opener for the song Don't Save Me. Execution is a acoustic guitar opening, and it's a very interesting acoustic guitar thing, and then some of the guitar delay comes in, and you hear the actual lead guitar parts. And so I've always heard this kind of concept before, where bands take acoustic guitar parts and then have some kind of effect, or basically just the lead guitars with their distortedness come in and overlay on top of the acoustics. And I've heard this before, but they do it here. But they do it kind of in a different way. I'm not hearing too much similarities with other stuff, but I really enjoyed the acoustic guitar. And of course, Don't Save Me, the actual aggressive thrash track that comes in after Execution, the opener, definitely did some great headbanging moments and some really interesting guitar riffs, and just good stuff there. And then the final track, Territorial Instinct / Bloodlust. It's kind of like track 6. Territorial Instinct is, it sounds like an acoustic guitar at first, but then you kind of can tell that it's actually some kind of effect or some kind of like, guitar effect they did for the clean guitar riff, and it's really cool to listen to. And then you get to the actual Bloodlust track, which really closes the album in a big way. Some heavy crunching riffs, some really epic sounding moments throughout that track, and really I think it ends the album on a good note. And that's the thing that's consistent throughout this whole entire record, is that these songs sound very alive, very refreshing, and overall just a great sound from the band, and great songs from the band as well. And those songs that I did not mention, they are good as well, but I just had to mention some of those things. But this album just sounds very refreshing because, it's not a band in particular, but it sounds like sometimes when I hear thrash metal bands nowadays, that some of the riffs they come up with sound kind of like riffs that we've kind of heard before, and that's not really a bash of the bands, but it just sounds like throughout this record, the Death Angel really just took the time out to write some very interesting and refreshing thrash riffs, so I gotta give them props for that. Some really good stuff throughout this record. So let's talk about the actual band, and then we'll be done with the review. Mark on vocals. The vocal performance, I think, throughout this album is very aggressive and very in your face, and the lyrical content, I really enjoyed that. I will have to say, this is not a complete bash on the vocals, just understand where I'm coming from. It's my personal opinion, my personal preference, that 95 to 97.5% of the vocal performance is in the lyrical content, mostly about, that range, 95% to 97.5%, is good. There are some vocal moments, and it doesn't really bash the vocals completely. It's just some moments I felt that was kind of like, maybe he could have went in a lower vocal part here, or maybe a higher part to really enhance that moment. But overall, even those small little bits throughout this whole entire album, the majority of the vocal performances is very good. His voice is very good, and props to that. Let's go to the guitar parts. Ted and Rob on guitars. Man, the guitar riffs, the rhythm riffs are insane. They are very intense and aggressive. I enjoy the guitar tone. It's very heavy, very thrash sounding, and they both sound tight. The guitar parts are tight. There's no loose ends anywhere. The lead guitar parts and the melodies are very beautifully well done, if that's how you want to pronounce that. Beautiful. But man, just some of the lead guitar parts, man, some of the guitar solos, I have to repeat them a couple times. Even listen to the song just once, I gotta go back and repeat it, because some of the solo work kind of catches you by surprise. You go, oh, I didn't expect that in the solo. Oh, I didn't expect that opening as that solo. Well, that's pretty intense. I gotta replay that to hear that again. So very good, very well done guitar parts. Really well done. Rhythm, melodies, and lead guitars, all good. Let's talk about Damien. I'm pretty sure that's how to say his name, on bass guitar. Like I said, talking about earlier in the review, how the bass really stood out to me. The bass stood out to me. The bass tone, after really listening more in depth and hearing the bass going right along with the guitars, and that the bass is actually turned up, and the bass parts throughout this album that are being played different than the guitars. Damien really did a standout job on bass. Love the tone, love his playing, and overall just great bass stuff coming from him. I really enjoyed that. And Will on drums, man, the drumming work, I can't praise this enough, because Death Angel's one of those bands that plays some very obscure and technical stuff that you really have to keep up with the band at some moments, and you really have to come up with some very interesting drum parts to keep up and really just to stand out, because the guitar work and the bass work and the vocals are extreme at moments, and they're very intense and technical, and so you really like to pay attention to the guitar parts here, the bass part whenever it comes up, and the vocal parts on any of their albums. But the drums really have to stand out to really get attention from people. And so Will, I think he did a great job. Really intense double bass work, some really intense playing, and overall just a great sound from his drums. So overall, the band sounds amazing. The band sounds alive, refreshing, and they are just continuing to put out some amazing thrash riffs and overall put out an amazing thrash record. So The Dream Calls for Blood, Death Angel, that's the review. If I had to give a rating, and I'm going to give a rating, I give this album a 9 out of 10. A very, very well done thrash album, and overall it's a great release from the band, and I'm hoping that any fan of metal or any fan of thrash metal in general, check out this album if you can, and let me know what you think. If you've heard this album, comment down below and let me know what your favorite track from this album is. So that's my review, guys. Thank you guys for watching, and if you liked the video, and if you like me, like the video, and if you like me and you want to see more, click my name or subscribe to see more. Thank you guys for watching. See ya.